Everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. When we talk about an unserved household, a lot of times what we're thinking about would be a number of homes in a particular area that are not connected, that don't have a good broadband service provider. But sometimes it's just a matter of how long your driveway is. Be right back. Thanks for joining me, Eric Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So I wanted to talk about this story and maybe some of the implications of this and what it means as far as unserved and underserved, as far as the BEAD program and broadband mapping and what that would all entail. So you can see here, this is, let me make this big so we can read it. This is New Maryland County grant tackles the long driveway broadband gap. So that is an issue where we've got people that maybe are in an area that is served, but they've got a really long driveway, and that is causing them to be not served. So, oops, let's go ahead and get rid of that. There it goes. Okay. You can see here, Evelyn Jacobson, the County Chief Information Officer, told Fierce, this is in Fierce Telecom, that long driveways account for about 30% of the approximately 4,800 unserved homes in Charles County, and this is in Maryland. Low return on investment, lack of access to middle mile infrastructure, and backhaul. These are two reasons commonly cited by operators when they explain why some parts of the U.S. remain without access to broadband service today. But there's another hurdle lurking, especially in rural areas, which prevents some residents from getting connected even if a fixed provider does come to town, a long driveway. Now, Charles County in Maryland is leading the charge to tackle the issue head on, which is great. They raise some questions in here that I don't think are really issues moving forward, let's say with BEAD, but I'm going to cover that as well. So after I read through this, we'll look at some things that I believe will show that if you have a long driveway, that you will not be considered unserved because there's a broadband line running past your home. So the county's work started several years ago when it established a rural broadband task force aimed at closing the connectivity gap. In 2019, the task force hired a consultant to help it develop a broadband strategic plan, which was subsequently approved in early 2020. That plan identified the unserved residents in the county and grouped them into one of three categories. Those in contiguous unserved areas, the category 1, those in unserved pockets, category 2, and locations set so far back from a road that service providers are unwilling to reach them unless the homeowners share the cost. And we've heard a lot about that. There was the story the other day that I was doing about a community in California, Los Altos Hills, where it's a very wealthy community, but there's a lot of homes out there that don't have broadband because when people inquire about the broadband, in order to get the line to their home, it could be just to one home or it could be to several homes in the area because they're all kind of spread out and they're in topographically difficult areas, hills, mountains, those kinds of things. The one guy was quoted, I think, $250,000 from Comcast to be able to run a line to his home. So obviously that wasn't going to fly. So he banded together with some neighbors and with a co-op that was getting started there, and they started putting in fiber. And they were able to get people connected. And you hear about this where they'll be fairly close to broadband. They can see how close it is to their home. They can see a pole. But in order to get to their home, to do all the drilling, trenching, whatever they have to do, and repairing of that area once it comes through, they're charged these huge sums. Not usually $250,000, but a lot of times it could be tens of thousands easily. So Evelyn Jacobson, the County Chief Information Officer, told Fierce homes with long driveways account for about 30% of the approximate 4,800 unserved homes in Charles County. As noted in the Broadband Strategic Plan, however, these homes are not considered unserved under federal and state definitions, a status which can be immensely frustrating for residents. So they're saying here that you could be in an area where fiber is going right past your home, in a sense, right down the street, covering several neighborhoods, and because your driveway is too long, you can't get it, but you're not considered unserved. I don't know how true that is, and it seems like we'll hear here at the end that the county is doing something about it using federal funds. So, and again, I don't think it's an issue moving forward with BEAD, and I'll talk about that. Jacobson said the county has spent the past couple of years securing grants to address locations in categories 1 and 2. When funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, became available for broadband projects, the county saw an opportunity to tackle the third category, she added. So they're using ARPA funds, which is a federal program, to be able to tackle this. Now using ARPA funding, Charles County is offering grants of up to $15,000 to help Category 3 residents get service. Jacobson noted local providers, Comcast, Verizon, and Think Big networks have all indicated their willingness to participate in the grant program, and I certainly understand that. So there could be situations where maybe Comcast or one of these others would say, you know, it's $10,000 to get the line to your home, and this would cover that. If it's more, we don't know what happens in that situation. But what exactly qualifies as a long driveway? A driveway that requires a service drop longer than the existing ISP will construct for free, Jacobson explained. The service drop is the last part of the installation that connects the home to the network running along the road. Think Big and Comcast will build a service drop up to 300 feet for free, and Verizon will build a service drop up to 225 feet for free. Beyond those lengths, the homeowner has to pay. A Comcast rep told Fierce the 300-foot specification is outlined in its right-of-way agreement with the county. The representative added it's unclear whether the $15,000 grant will cover the full cost of deployment in all cases, given costs can vary based on the length of the driveway, geographic obstacles, and the type of equipment required to install the drop. And that $250,000 or whatever it was that Comcast was quoting in I think that was in Los Altos Hills, had to do with the length, had to do with the fact that they had to drill through a driveway, get through a driveway that had some kind of diamond asphalt that's really hardly compacted, the kind of thing they use on highways. So special equipment, difficult, that kind of thing. Still probably not that, it shouldn't cost that much, but still that's a lot of money. But it was a difficult drop. However, it's a step in the right direction, and the operator is proud to partner with Charles County, the rep added. These types of programs we think are great use of federal, state, and local infrastructure funds, the rep said. We're all for it. More opportunities to extend our network to more people is always going to be something that we're excited about. Of course they are, you know, and somebody's paying for it. It's not the customer in this case. It would be through federal funds that are getting paid for that. My question is, you know, if it's up to 1521 and December 31st, 2022 will be eligible for reimbursement if they apply before December 31, 2023. So that's good news for those folks that maybe did foot the bill for this earlier during that period. New connections funded through the program must be completed on or before December 30th, 2024, and that may be something related to ARPA funds and when those need to be used. I believe that's it in this article. So anyway, I was going to look at a couple of things in here. First, this is the broadband report. So this is what came out in January 2020. I'm not going to look at this report. I'm just going to look at a few items from it. So you can see there's a lot in here about their analysis of how they went through this, and they talk about the three categories in here. So I will post a link to the article, I'll post a link to this if you want to look through that. And I pulled a few things out of that and a few other places that I thought I kind of wanted to talk through here. So this is, first off, this is the definition of unserved locations, underserved locations. Actually, I'm sorry, this is just unserved locations from the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity to NOFO. So I want to be real clear, I want to be real clear on what an unserved location is, and then will a long driveway be something that can be serviced? Will that be considered an unserved location? And the short answer is yes. If you want to know why, just hang around. I'll explain it. But here you see unserved location. The term unserved location means a broadband serviceable location that the broadband data maps show as A, having no access to broadband service, or B, lacking access to reliable broadband service offered with a speed of not less than 25, well, basically 25 by 3, and latency less than or equal to 100 milliseconds. That's unserved, right? So it's got to be 25 by 3 or better. Latency's got to be under 100 milliseconds, which is usually no problem at all. And it's got to be reliable broadband service. And reliable broadband service, there are a couple of things that are excluded. Satellite is excluded from reliable broadband service, and fixed wireless internet is excluded if it's not fully licensed spectrum. There are some, I think might be something there with maybe a mix of licensed and unlicensed, but in general, I think for it to be reliable broadband, it needs to be licensed fixed wireless. And of course, anything else that can meet the speeds of 25 by 3 fiber cable, those would be considered reliable broadband service. Then you've got an unserved service project. So this is where you wonder, it's like, can this be applied to a single home? And I'm not talking about a long driveway at this point. I'm just talking about a single home that maybe does not have this kind of access. The term unserved service project means a project in which not less than 80% of broadband serviceable locations served by the project are unserved locations. An unserved service project may be as small as a single unserved broadband serviceable location. So what they're trying to do is bundle as many of these locations together where there's at least 80% of the homes that are unserved to be considered an unserved service project. But if you've got one home, and that's the only home you can bundle in there, that can be an unserved service project. So you can address a single home that's unserved in that situation, and maybe as small as a single unserved broadband serviceable location. This is from the Broadband Data Center help. So this is regarding the broadband data collection process that service providers are having to do. They've already submitted their locations. Most of them have already submitted their locations on where they offer service. And that data is being overlaid right now onto the broadband fabric that was created by CostQuest. So CostQuest created a broadband fabric, they call it. It's basically a list, a set of data of every single broadband serviceable location in the United States. And we know there's errors in there. So there's some locations that are identified as broadband serviceable, and it really might be a cow shack on a farm, and it doesn't really need broadband. There's other areas, there might be a farm that's got 3 buildings and it may be only 2. You know, all 3 should have broadband, maybe only 2 are identified with broadband and those are missing, or there could be maybe there's a brand new neighborhood where stuff's missing. So we know there's errors and there are challenges going on right now to that information. But that's basically what the fabric is. It's the FCC contracted with CostQuest to try to identify every single structure in the United States, and I think in territories as well, that are supposed to get broadband service. And then on top of that, the internet service providers today that are existing today were supposed to list all of the areas where they actually can provide broadband service to those locations. So they looked at the broadband fabric data, and they were supposed to upload, you know, at every single address or location ID, do they provide broadband there? And if so, what's the maximum download and upload speed at that location? What's the latency? Is it less than 100 milliseconds? And a few other little things they needed to provide in there. So that is what's going to create the broadband maps. And you see here that's what this broadband data center help center is about, is this whole process of getting that service provider information on top of the broadband fabric. And you see here it says providers of fixed broadband service must identify the areas as either a coverage polygon or a list of locations where they've actually built out their broadband network infrastructure and to which they either have a customer or could perform a standard broadband installation. A standard installation is defined in the Broadband Data Act as the initiation by a provider of fixed broadband internet service within 10 business days of a request in an area in which the provider has not previously offered that service, with no charges or delays attributable to the extension of the network provider. So basically what this is saying is, for these long driveways, that area cannot be considered served if for the broadband service provider to connect it, there would have to be an extension of the network. In other words, they have to extend their main network out further, or they'd have to charge the customer to get that home connected up. So in my mind, what this is saying is that long driveway, even if there is a fiber line running right by that home, and there's several other houses close by that are connected, if there's a long driveway that's preventing that customer from getting connected, even though that area is considered served, that particular customer or potential subscriber there is considered unserved, and they would be eligible to be an unserved project, even if it was just one home. So if you look at that, actually mentions the Broadband Data Act. So the Broadband Data Act came out, I think it was finally signed into law in late 2020? It came out, but it wasn't funded. So the FCC said, hey, we'd like to do this, but you got to fund it. So it was finally funded. And this is what is driving the FCC broadband maps. This is the act that came out that said, hey, you need to get better maps. They're not good because you're using Form 477 data, and that's only looking at a census block. That's the only granularity was by census block. So you could have one customer in a census block served, and the whole census block was considered served. So we know that's not right. So this is supposed to get us to this every single address, determining whether it has broadband, and if it does, what the maximum upload and download speeds are for the different providers. So you can see it's right here is where they're pulling this from. Again, the term standard broadband installation means the initiation, basically what it said, the initiation by a provider of fixed broadband internet access service in an area in which the provider has not previously offered the service, with no charges or delays attributable to the extension of the network of the provider. And then here it mentions the time. and includes the initiation of fixed broadband internet access service through routine installation that can be completed not later than 10 business days after the date on which the service request is submitted. So this would be like the kind of normal thing where you live in a neighborhood where fiber's available and you've either had service before or you never had service, so there's not a drop to your home. Let's say you've never had service, so there's not a drop. And you call up and say, hey, I'd like internet service. And they say, okay, we'll schedule a technician to come out there Monday next week. They'll be out there and they'll come in the house, bring in the cable modem or the ONT or whatever it is that they're going to be hooking up. So it's a standard installation. It's not something where it's like, okay, well, we're going to have to extend out the drop. It's 1,000 feet. We're going to have to drill through the driveway. We're going to have to do this and that, and it's going to cost you $15,000. You know, you can't charge for it, and that's not a standard installation anyway. It's probably not something you could get done in 10 business days. I suppose you could try, but if you charge for it, it's not a standard installation. So, hold on one second. Let me get this thing to move here. And why is it not moving? Sorry, I am trying to get the next slide to go here. Stand by one second. Get this thing to work. It's not working. Try again. Acting like that's the end, but it's not. Oh, it is. Wait a minute. Oh, I didn't start at the beginning. That's the problem. I didn't start at the beginning. I started somewhere in the middle. Okay, so hold on one second. So I was actually at the end of this. So let's take a quick look. All right, so actually I was in the middle of what I had put there on these slides. So let me go back. So this was in the broadband strategic plan that the county did. So they were showing here the different categories. So you had category 1 and 2, you know, contiguous geographic areas, and you had addresses on isolated roads, and you had your addresses with long driveways, and that's where it's showing approximately 1,500 of those. And then this is out of that report. So you see here, category 3 comprises premises for which the cost of installation of the service drop, the connection from the road to the user's premises or premise, is so high as to make service infeasible. In Charles County, this generally refers to locations where the home or business is more than 300 feet away from the road. That distance being the typical limit for cable franchisees' obligations to install a service drop at no cost to the customer. We estimate there are approximately 1,500 such premises in the county, and this picture shows a sample of that. So you can see here, maybe kind of hard to see, but you've got different homes along this road, and these are all served. So you've got maybe fiber running down the road here, or cable modem service, and then you've got drops going to each one of these homes, and then you've got this home way out here in the woods. So that's a really long driveway, and it exceeds 300 feet. So for this person to get broadband, they have to go to whoever the provider is and say, I'd like broadband. And then that provider, since it's over 300 feet, can quote them some exorbitant charge. I say exorbitant. It could be that it costs that much, but it could, like I say, it could be $10,000, $15,000 or more to connect up their home. And actually in that Los Altos Hills I was talking about, you know, I think the quote was $250,000 for one home. The guy who did go and gather the neighbors together in the co-op, and they started putting together this this plan to get people connected, they all wound up having to pay $10,000 to $15,000 to get their service. So it wasn't subsidized. This co-op was charging pretty much, I think, maybe what their cost was to be able to do this, but their cost literally was $10,000 to $15,000. So they were able to get it for that amount, and this was in a wealthy area. So these people, most of these people could afford it. I think it was like there were 17 homes and 15 of them took it. In fact, there was one guy, he was the CEO, that paid for several homes along the way to his home because he was so mad at the cable company that he wanted to be able to pay for that for other people. So here though, you know, this person would be footing the bill, or in the case now of this county, they are going to provide up to $15,000 to connect up folks that are in this situation. And you can see here it says this is a situation that's extremely frustrating for Charles County residents who seek service but cannot afford to cover the cost of drop installation even if broadband infrastructure passes their property. And thus they are considered to be served with broadband by the state and federal governments. And so what this is saying here is that because the the line passes their property, they're considered served by state and federal governments. I don't know why that would be. Certainly not according to BEAD as to what I just showed you. Service to these homes or businesses is a matter of the affordability of drop construction, not availability of infrastructure, because the ISP will serve the premises if the customer pays for the drop connection, but many consumers find the quoted cost of connection to be very high. As I say, most people are not wealthy enough to be able to afford that or to want to afford that. Under the county's franchise agreement, for example, Comcast is obligated to build a drop to a customer at no cost if the setback is 300 feet or less. The 300-foot standard is consistent with what we see in other areas of Maryland. So I would imagine that's consistent with other areas of the country because there are franchise fees for these incumbent providers, and that's one of the things that is usually in there is how far they have to go before they can charge somebody to get them connected up. And then, we talked about all of this here. So we went through this, the unserved locations, et cetera. Again, that's the Broadband Data Act. And then here, this last slide that I got stuck on before. So basically, it seems to me that through BEAD money that's coming out, that there's not going to be any issue with these long driveways as far as they're not going to be considered served, because you can see here that if the service provider that is in the area, it's not considered served if it's not if it can be handled, it can't be handled by a standard installation. So the service provider has to extend their network, or if they had to charge the customer, then it's considered unserved, and that customer should have no problem, or that area, that particular household or location or whatever his business or home should have no problem qualifying, for being unserved and being an unserved project. As we saw, an unserved project could be just one home, maybe as small as a single unserved broadband serviceable location. So I don't think we have any issues there. So anyway, interesting problem. You don't think about this, again, so much. It tends to be more in rural areas. It could be in farm areas or areas like we just saw where you've got a neighborhood there and then you've got some home that may have been there for a long time. And maybe the neighborhood kind of grew up around it. And that home was there for a long time with that really long driveway. And suddenly all of their neighbors have broadband and they don't because of that long driveway. Well, looks like in this county in Maryland, a lot of that's going to be taken care of. And I think with funds coming through with BEAD, we'll be tackling those situations in addition to the other things that we think about, which again are just various communities that are kind of separated because there's just not a lot of people that live in there. So it hasn't been something that's been really a good return on investment for the service provider, or it could be that it's a low-income area. So again, while there might be a lot of people, there's not a lot of people that can afford broadband, so they don't necessarily build out those areas. So because of that, they quite often don't get served. But we're going to see hopefully all of these categories, and these guys identified as 3, hopefully all 3 of these categories will be covered when we finally get the BEAD money sometime in mid to late next year. They hopefully will start to get some of this money rolling. But there's additional funds, as we saw here. So they must have decided with ARPA that they could apply that money, obviously. So they're taking that money from ARPA. So that's a federal program that they're able to take that money and then help some of these folks that have got these long driveways. Thanks for joining me for Broadband Deployment News. If you are a service provider and you need help in any way, don't forget that we provide managed services and diagnostics for broadband service providers, whether that be device activation, diagnostics, hosted email, voice over IP, hosted turnkey IPTV services. We have all kinds of things that we do. So whether you're a brand new service provider, getting in the business, or you've been in business for years, look us up. You can see our information right there, web address, email, or phone number. Just reach out to us. Thanks for joining me. If this was helpful, give me a like on the video if you would. Subscribe, click the little bell to be notified when I'm live. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.